My husband said he only needed help with one school trip. Then he asked about my daughter's inheritance. I told him it was locked away. He stared at me like a stranger and said, "So my kids were never your family?" To him, family meant everything should eventually become shared. To me, family meant protecting the one child who had nobody else standing between her and the world. I didn't say that out loud right away. I just stood in the kitchen with one hand on the counter and the other pressed against my stomach because I suddenly felt sick. Logan was across from me, holding his phone. The school trip email was still open on the screen. His daughter, Riley, had been invited to a spring trip. It was one of those expensive school things that sounds amazing for the kid and terrifying for every adult expected to pay for it. Logan and his ex, Megan, had already been arguing about who should cover what. Then Logan came to me. At first, it sounded casual. He said, "Can we talk about Riley's trip?" I said, "Sure." He said, "It's more expensive than I thought." I remember wiping the counter even though it was already clean. I do that when money comes up. I keep my hands busy because money has never just been money to me. It has always meant safety. Groceries. Gas. Rent. The difference between sleeping and staring at the ceiling doing math in my head. I asked, "How much are we talking?" He told me. I didn't laugh, but I almost did from shock. Not because Riley didn't deserve to go. She did. She's a good kid. Quiet sometimes, but not rude. Smart in a way that sneaks up on you. She can sit through an entire dinner barely speaking, then say one dry little comment that makes everyone laugh. But the amount was not small. Logan said, "Megan says she can pay part of it, but not half. I can cover some too, but not all of it right now." I nodded and said, "Okay. So, what are you asking me?" He looked at me like the answer should have been obvious. "Could you cover the rest?" he asked. "Just temporarily." That word bothered me. Temporarily. People say temporarily when they want money now and consequences later. I said, "Logan, I don't have that much sitting and checking." He sighed, not angry yet, just impatient. "I'm not talking about your paycheck money." And there it was. The thing underneath the thing. I stopped wiping the counter. I said, "Then what are you talking about?" He said, "The inheritance. From your grandmother." I felt my whole body go still. That inheritance was not a secret. Not really. Logan knew my grandmother, Doris, had left me a small house, some savings, and land that had been in my family for years. He knew it mattered to me. He knew it was tied to my daughter, Lily. He knew because I had told him more than once that my grandmother used to say, "This is for you and that little girl." But knowing something exists and believing you have a right to it are two very different things. I told him, "I can't use that money for Riley's trip." He frowned. "Why not?" "Because it isn't available like that." "What does that mean?" "It's in Lily's trust." His expression changed slowly, like a door closing from the inside. He said, "What trust?" That was when I realized he had signed papers he had not truly read. The trust had been part of the prenup documents. It had been discussed with paperwork and signatures, not in the emotional way he later said he deserved. My attorney, Jacqueline, made sure it was included. I did not hide it in a drawer. I did not forge anything. I did not lie. But I also didn't sit across from Logan and say, "You need to understand that once this is done, nobody can guilt me into changing it." Because I already knew he would try. That is the part people judge me for. And maybe they should. I had been scared. Not of Logan hurting me. Not of some dramatic thing. I was scared of being worn down by love. Scared he would look at me with that hurt expression and ask why I was building a wall before we were even married. Scared his mother would say children should all be equal. Scared his sister would say I was marrying the family, not just him. I was scared that if enough people called me selfish, I would start acting against my own daughter just to prove I was kind. So I did the paperwork before anyone could talk me out of it. And standing in that kitchen, watching Logan understand what that meant, I knew our marriage was about to split open. Before Logan, before the blended family dinners and shared calendars and extra backpacks by the door, it was just me and Lily. Lily was not a loud child. She noticed things adults hoped she would miss. If I opened the fridge and stared too long, she would say, "We can have noodles tonight." I like noodles. If my card declined at the pharmacy, she would suddenly remember she did not need the cough syrup that badly. If her dad forgot another weekend, she would shrug like it didn't matter, then sleep with her back turned to the door. Her father, Brian, had a way of disappearing without technically leaving. He would text just enough to remind us he existed. He would say, "Tell Lily I love her," like love was something I could deliver for him. He would promise birthday money, then forget. He would blame work, stress, car trouble, bank issues, anything except the simple truth that being a father was not convenient for him. When Lily was 7, she asked me, "Is Dad busy, or does he not like being around me?" I remember kneeling in front of her and saying, "He loves you in his own way." Even as I said it, I hated myself a little. Because children do not need love in someone's own way. They need love that shows up. After that, Lily stopped asking when he was coming. She stopped drawing him in family pictures. She stopped saving him the green candies because he once said he liked them. People think children are resilient because they become quiet. Sometimes they are just done making noise where nobody listens. My grandmother saw all of that. Doris was not soft in the way people expect grandmothers to be. She did not bake cookies in an apron or call everyone sweetheart. She was practical. She clipped coupons. She kept cash in envelopes. She could make a pot of soup stretch so far it felt like both a miracle and a warning. When I was overwhelmed, she came over pretending she needed to drop something off. A bag of groceries. A pack of socks for Lily. A casserole she called extra, even though we both knew she had made it for us. Once, after Brian missed Lily's school event, Doris sat beside me on the porch and said, "Don't waste your life begging a man to become decent." I said, "I'm not begging." She looked at me and said, "You're hoping. Sometimes that costs more." When she got sick, she did not tell me how bad it was until she had to. That was her way. She hated pity. She hated fuss. She hated people hovering like she was already gone. The last real conversation I had with her was in her living room. Lily was outside picking dandelions from the yard. Doris had a blanket over her legs even though the room was warm. She said, "The house will be yours." I shook my head. "Don't talk like that." "I am talking like that because you need to listen." I started crying, and she clicked her tongue like tears were an inconvenience. She said, "You and Lily need ground under your feet." "I can't do much now, but I can do that." I told her I didn't want anything. She said, "That's why I'm giving it to you." After she died, grief hit in pieces. At the funeral, I was too busy making sure Lily had tissues and water. At the attorney's office, I was too numb to process the words. House. Savings. Land. Beneficiary. Transfer. It sounded unreal. The house was not a mansion. The land was not some huge estate. The savings were not millions. But after years of barely holding things together, it felt like air. For the first time, I could breathe without immediately checking a bank balance. I repaired the worst parts of the house and rented it out because selling it felt wrong. Every month, when the rental income came in, I thought about Doris sitting at her kitchen table with envelopes and lists, making sure the people she loved were fed before she ever bought anything for herself. So when Logan came into my life, he did not enter a blank space. He entered a life I had built from fear, love, grief, and survival. At first, he seemed to understand that. He was gentle with Lily. Not pushy. Not fake. He did not try to become her dad in 6 weeks like some men do when they want to impress you. He asked if she wanted him at her school concert instead of assuming. He remembered she hated onions. He kept extra hot chocolate packets at his place because she liked them after cold evenings. When I met Riley and Mason, I tried to be the same way. Present, but not forceful. Kind, but not performative. I didn't ask them to call me anything. I didn't act offended when they chose Megan over me because of course they did. She was their mother. Mason was all elbows and questions and snacks. He could ask about space, dinosaurs, and waffles in the same breath. Riley was more guarded. She watched before she trusted. I understood that. They came over every other weekend, some weeknights, holidays, and chunks of summer, depending on the schedule. I made pancakes for them. I learned which cereal Mason liked. I kept a basket of hair ties for Riley because she always lost hers. I bought all 3 kids matching Christmas pajamas because Lily wanted everyone to match. I was trying. But trying to be loving did not mean I stopped being Lily's mother. When Logan and I started talking about marriage, the idea of a prenup came up. We were sitting at the dining table after the kids had gone to bed. His kids were staying that weekend, and all 3 children had fallen asleep in the living room after insisting they were not tired. The TV was still playing some animated movie nobody was watching. I said, "If we get married, I want to talk to an attorney first." He looked up from his glass of water. "For what?" "A prenup." He got quiet. Not angry. Just quiet enough that the air shifted. "You think we need that?" he asked. "I think with kids and property, it's better to be clear." He leaned back. "I don't want your grandmother's stuff, Victoria." "I know. Do you?" I hated that question because the honest answer was yes and no. I believed Logan loved me. I did not think he was sitting there planning to steal from my daughter. But people do not have to be villains to become entitled. Sometimes they just convince themselves their need is more urgent than your boundary. I said, it's not about thinking you're bad. It's about making sure nobody has to guess later. He said, I don't want this to feel like we're going into marriage already separated. I reached across the table and touched his hand. We're going into marriage as parents, I said. That means we have responsibilities from before us. He nodded eventually. He said he understood. I wanted to believe that was the end of it. But after that, little comments started slipping into normal conversations. We would be talking about summer plans, and Logan would say, once we're married, maybe the rental money from Doris's house could help with a family trip. I would say, maybe we can plan something from our regular budget. He would say, sure, I just mean it's nice to have options. Another time, we drove past a bigger house for sale. It had a yard large enough for all 3 kids to run around in. Logan slowed down and said, imagine if we could put a real down payment on something like that. I said, with what money? He gave me a side glance. I said, Logan. He laughed softly. I'm just dreaming. But it didn't feel like dreaming. It felt like testing a fence. Then Megan asked him for extra help with school clothes. I only heard his side of the call. He was in the hallway, trying to keep his voice low. He said, I already sent what we agreed on. Then, no, I'm not saying they don't need things. Then I can't just pull money from nowhere. After he hung up, he came into the kitchen frustrated. I asked, everything okay? He rubbed his face. It's just hard sometimes. I know. He looked at me for a moment, and I felt what was coming before he said it. It's hard knowing you have money sitting there while my kids need things. I did not answer right away. Because his kids did need things. All kids need things. Clothes, school fees, activities, random projects due tomorrow that require poster board and glitter. I was not blind to that. But they were not going without. They had Megan. They had Logan. They had grandparents who showed up. They had birthdays with 2 cakes and 2 sets of presents. They had adults arguing over who should pay, which meant at least adults were there. Lily had me. I said carefully, the inheritance is for Lily's future. He said, so we're not really blending families? There it was again. The question that sounded emotional but landed like a trap. I said, blending families doesn't mean erasing where things came from. He shook his head. Kids don't understand legal technicalities. They understand who gets treated differently. I said, they're already treated differently by reality. Riley and Mason have 2 active parents. Lily doesn't. His jaw tightened. So my kids get less from you because their mom is around? No. They get what I can give them as their stepmom. But Doris's inheritance is different. He stood up and said he was tired. I stayed at the table long after he left. That was the night I made the appointment with Jacqueline. Her office was small and plain, with a plant in the corner that looked like it was losing the will to live. She listened without interrupting while I explained the inheritance, the wedding, the kids, Logan's comments, and my fear that I would be pressured until the money slowly became everyone's emergency fund. When I finished, she asked one question. What do you want the inheritance to do? I said, protect Lily. From what? I stared at my hands. Then I said, from depending on people who can change their minds. Jacqueline nodded like she had heard that answer before. We set up the trust. Doris's house, the land, and most of the inherited savings went into it. I remained trustee until Lily reached the right age. The trust could be used for Lily's education, medical needs, housing, or serious emergencies. It could not be used for my marriage, Logan, Riley, Mason, or my personal spending unless the expense directly protected Lily. It was strict because I needed it to be strict. The trust was included in the prenup paperwork. Logan signed. He asked some questions, but not enough. He had time, access, and the option to get his own legal advice. He chose to trust the summary version because he wanted the uncomfortable part over with. Later, he would say I should have made him understand. Maybe he was right, but I still believe he understood enough. He just didn't think it would ever matter. Then we got married. For a while, life settled into something almost peaceful. The kids adjusted. Not perfectly, but enough. Lily and Mason built a blanket fort one rainy afternoon and argued like siblings over who got the flashlight. Riley started sitting at the kitchen island while I cooked, pretending she was only there because her phone was charging. Once, she asked me, "Do you actually like having us here?" The question caught me off guard. I said yes. I wouldn't make this much pasta for people I didn't like. She smiled a little. I held on to that moment. Because when everything fell apart later, I needed to remember that my relationship with those kids had been real before adults poisoned it. The school trip email arrived in January. By then, Logan and I had been married less than a year. Long enough for routines to form, not long enough for the newness to fully wear off. The kids had toothbrushes in the bathroom. Their favorite snacks had spots in the pantry. Lily had stopped acting like every weekend with Riley and Mason was an invasion of her space. It was not perfect, but it was working. Then Money walked into the room and sat between us like a person. After Logan asked about using the inheritance and I told him it was in Lily's trust, the kitchen went silent. He said, "How much?" I said, "Logan, that's not the point." "How much is in it?" His voice was low. I should have refused to answer. Maybe that would have been smarter. But I was tired of dancing around the truth. I told him the approximate value of the house, the land, and the savings. He went pale. Then he laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "You locked all of that away before marrying me?" "I protected Lily before marrying anyone." His eyes hardened. "My kids are your family now too. They are part of my family. But they have two parents. Lily has me." That was the sentence that broke something. He stepped back like I had slapped him. "Wow. That is not an insult to your kids." "It sounds like one." "It's reality." He shook his head. "No, it's favoritism with legal paperwork." That hurt more than I expected. I said, "Favoritism would be me taking money meant for Lily and spreading it around so everyone feels better." He said, "Money meant for Lily? Your grandmother left it to you. And she told me why." Convenient. I stared at him. "What does that mean?" "It means dead people can't clarify." I don't think he realized how cruel that sounded until he saw my face. He tried to soften his voice. "Victoria, I'm not trying to attack your grandmother. But you just did. I'm saying you made a permanent decision based on what you think she wanted." "No. I made a permanent decision based on what I know my daughter needs." We went in circles for almost an hour. He said I had created two classes of children in our home. I said he was trying to turn my daughter's safety net into a family wallet. He said I had deceived him. I said he had signed the prenup. Then he said, "I trusted you." I said, "Trusting me doesn't mean ignoring paperwork and blaming me later." That was when he walked out. He slept in the guest room that night. The next morning, he barely spoke to me. He made coffee, packed Mason's lunch for later that weekend, and moved around me like I was furniture. I thought maybe we would cool down. Maybe we would talk. Maybe we would find our way back into a normal argument, the kind where people are upset but still careful. Instead, his sister Julie called me before noon. I knew immediately Logan had told her. She didn't even say hello properly. She said, "I just want to understand how you can marry my brother and treat his kids like outsiders." I closed my eyes. "Julie, this is between me and Logan. They're children." "I know that." "Then why are you punishing them?" "I'm not punishing anyone." She scoffed. "You put money where your real family is. That says enough." I hung up because I knew if I stayed on the phone, I would say something I could not take back. Then Cheryl, Logan's mother, sent a long text. She wrote that she was disappointed in me. That marriage meant unity. That children should not feel less loved because of biology. Then she wrote the sentence that made my hands shake. "Your grandmother would be ashamed to see you use her gift to divide a family." I read that line 3 times. Then I deleted the message because I knew if I kept looking at it, I would cry. By evening, Megan had somehow heard about it too. She sent Logan a message. I saw part of it because his phone lit up on the counter while I was standing there. It said, "I always knew she looked down on our kids. Don't let her make them feel unwanted in your own house." I asked Logan, "Why does Megan know about Lily's trust?" He looked guilty for half a second, then defensive. "I needed to talk to someone." "You told your ex-wife private financial information about my daughter?" "It affects my kids." "No. It affects our marriage. And now you've dragged every adult around them into it." He said, "Maybe because you made a decision that affects the whole family." I gripped the back of a chair so hard my fingers hurt. This is exactly why I made it untouchable. For 2 weeks, the house felt wrong. Logan was polite in front of the kids, but cold when they left the room. Cheryl stopped replying to my messages about weekend plans. Julie posted something vague online about people showing their true colors after marriage. Megan started sending little comments through the kids, nothing obvious enough to confront directly, but enough to sting. Riley became quieter. Mason asked fewer questions. Lily noticed everything. One night, while I was folding laundry, Lily came into my room and said, "Did I do something?" I put the shirt down. "No, baby. Why would you think that?" She shrugged. "Everyone's weird." I wanted to tell her the truth. I wanted to say, the adults are fighting because I protected what your great-grandmother left for you. But what child should carry that? So I said, grown-up stuff. Not your fault. She nodded, but she did not fully believe me. That is one of the ugliest parts of adult conflict. You can keep your voice down. You can close doors. You can say everything is fine. Kids still feel the temperature change. The worst moment came on a Sunday afternoon. Riley was in the kitchen with me. Logan had taken Mason to the store. Lily was in her room. I was making grilled cheese because Riley had asked for it, and I was grateful for the small normalness of it. Bread, butter, pan. Something simple. She stood by the counter, twisting the sleeve of her hoodie. Then she said, "Can I ask you something?" I said, "Of course." She didn't look at me. "Do you hate me?" The spatula slipped from my hand and hit the stove. I turned around slowly. "What?" She swallowed. "Do you hate me because I'm not really yours?" I felt my throat close. "Riley, no. Never." Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. Somehow that made it worse. She said, "Then why did you make sure I couldn't have anything?" I walked toward her, then stopped because I didn't want to crowd her. "Who told you that?" She looked down. Nobody had to say it directly. I could see it. Bits and pieces from adults who thought they were being careful. A phone call overheard. A sharp comment from Megan. Cheryl saying something about fairness. Logan talking too loudly behind a closed door. I said, "Listen to me. Grown-up money problems are not your fault. They are not about whether I care about you." She whispered, "But Lily gets protected." That sentence broke my heart because it was true, but not in the way she meant it. I said, "Lily has been through things you haven't. That doesn't mean she matters more. It means I have to make sure she is safe in a different way." Riley said, "So I'm not safe here?" I started crying then. Quietly. I tried to stop, but I couldn't. "You are safe here," I said. "You should always feel safe here. And I am so sorry adults made you feel like money decides that." When Logan came home, he found Riley in her room and me sitting at the kitchen table with 2 burned grilled cheese sandwiches still in the pan. I looked at him and said, "Your daughter asked if I hated her." His face fell. I said, "Whatever you think I did wrong, you do not get to let children carry this." For once, he had no answer. We started counseling the next week. I will not pretend it fixed everything quickly. It did not. Our counselor, Alan, was calm in a way that annoyed both of us at first. He did not let Logan turn every sentence into an accusation, and he did not let me hide behind being practical. He asked uncomfortable questions, then sat there while we struggled to answer them. In the first session, Logan said, "She made a life-changing decision before we were married and didn't really tell me." I said, "It was in the prenup." He said, "That's not the same as a conversation." Alan looked at me. "Did you avoid the deeper conversation?" I hated that question because the answer was yes. "I avoided being pressured," I said. Logan asked, "By me?" I looked at him. Yes. That hurt him. I could see it. He said, "You think I would have taken from Lily?" "I think you would have asked me to make exceptions until the trust meant nothing." He leaned back like I had knocked the air out of him. I said, "And after the school trip, after your family called me selfish, after Megan got involved, after Riley asked if I hated her, I don't feel crazy for being afraid of that." He rubbed his hands over his face. For a long time, nobody spoke. Then Logan said quietly, "I didn't mean for Riley to hear any of it." I said, "But she did." He nodded. That was the beginning. Not a solution. Just the first honest crack in the wall. Over the next few weeks, we talked about things we should have talked about before marriage. Logan admitted that part of him felt ashamed when Megan asked for money, and he could not always say yes. Seeing the inheritance made him feel like there was an answer sitting there that I refused to consider. He said he knew, logically, that Doris had no connection to Riley and Mason, but emotionally it felt like I was drawing a bright line through the family. I told him that, for me, the inheritance was not extra money. It was the only safety net Lily had ever been given by someone who loved her without disappearing. I told him I had spent years being one emergency away from panic. Every time he called the trust, money sitting there, it made me feel like he did not understand what survival had cost us. He said, "I do understand." I said, "No, you understand bills. You don't understand being the only parent." He started to argue, then stopped. Because he knew it was true. Megan might frustrate him. They might argue. She might not always pay what he thought was fair. But she was there. Riley and Mason had a mother who answered the phone, signed forms, took them to appointments, and knew their shoe sizes. Lily's father did not even remember what grade she was in. That difference mattered. It did not make Riley and Mason less important. It made Lily more vulnerable. Eventually, Logan apologized for telling Julie, Cheryl, and Megan details they had no right to know. He said he had been hurt and wanted someone to validate him. I told him validation came at the cost of turning everyone against me. He apologized for that too. But apologies do not erase what people said. Julie eventually sent a short message saying she may have reacted emotionally. It was not exactly an apology, but it was better than nothing. Cheryl called and said, "I just want all the children to feel loved." I said, "Then please stop talking about money like it is proof of love." She went quiet. I do not think she liked that. But she needed to hear it. Megan never apologized. I did not expect her to. She simply stopped making comments after Logan told her the trust was not a co-parenting topic. That was enough. As for Riley, I asked Logan if we could speak to her together. Not some dramatic family meeting. Just a calm conversation. We sat at the dining table. Riley looked nervous. Mason was in the living room playing a game with Lily, loud enough to keep the house from feeling too heavy. I told Riley, "I need you to know something. The trust is not because of you. It is not because of Mason. It was made before the wedding because Lily's great-grandmother wanted Lily protected. That doesn't mean you are not cared for here." Riley stared at the table. I said, "You do not have to pretend that feels good. I know it might feel unfair." She whispered, "It does." I nodded. "I understand." Logan looked surprised that I didn't argue. I said, "But unfair feelings don't always mean someone did something cruel. Sometimes families are complicated because people come into them with different histories." Riley asked, "So Lily gets that because her dad isn't around?" "Partly," I said. "And because it came from her great-grandmother." Riley said, "My grandma said you were making sure we knew we weren't real family." Logan closed his eyes. I felt anger rise in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. "Your grandma was wrong to say that. Adults can be hurt and still be wrong." Riley nodded, but I could tell it would take time. That was the thing nobody wanted to admit. Damage takes longer to repair than to cause. Logan and I made an agreement after that. Money we earned during the marriage would go toward our shared household and shared life. We would plan family trips from our actual budget. We would create a small savings fund for shared family expenses, activities during our time together, and emergencies that affected the kids while they were with us. But Lily's trust would not be touched for the school trip, a bigger house, Megan's short months, Cheryl's idea of fairness, Logan's guilt, or anything that did not directly protect Lily. When I told Jacqueline what happened, she looked tired but not surprised. She said, "People often respect boundaries more after they realize they can't move them." That stayed with me. Because that was the calm victory, really. Not winning a fight. Not humiliating Logan. Not proving his family wrong in some dramatic way. The victory was that nobody could move the boundary anymore. A few months have passed now. Things are better, but not perfect. I don't want to lie and say one counseling session and a few apologies healed everyone. Logan and I are still rebuilding trust. Riley still gets quiet around money conversations. Lily knows more than I wish she did, though I've tried to keep the burden away from her. But the house feels warmer again. Mason still asks for waffles like he is personally keeping the waffle industry alive. Riley sits at the counter sometimes while I cook. She does not ask if I hate her anymore. Last weekend, she asked if we could make grilled cheese again, and I said yes, even though we both remembered the burned ones. That felt like something. Not forgiveness exactly. Something smaller. Maybe a thread. Logan has stopped calling the inheritance money sitting there. He calls it Lily's trust now. The first time he said it that way, I noticed. I didn't praise him for it. He is an adult. But I noticed. One night, after the kids were asleep, he said, "I still wish you had told me more clearly before the wedding." I said, "I know." He said, "But I understand why you were scared." I looked at him, and for once, I believed he meant it. I said, "I wish I had been less scared too." That is probably the most honest thing I can say. I do not think I handled everything perfectly. I made decisions from fear. Love, yes, but fear too. I did not give Logan the kind of conversation a future husband deserved. I can admit that. But fear does not automatically make a decision wrong. Sometimes fear is your body remembering what it cost to survive. I remember standing in grocery aisles, choosing what to put back. I remember pretending I was not worried when my card took too long to process. I remember Lily asking if we were okay when she was too young to understand what okay meant. I remember Doris slipping folded bills into my coat pocket because she knew I would refuse if she handed them to me directly. And I remember promising myself that if I ever had a way to give Lily solid ground, I would not trade it away to make adults more comfortable. So no, I did not undo the trust. I will not undo it. I love Riley and Mason. I care about them. I want them safe, happy, and loved in this home. But Lily is my daughter. She is the child who looked out windows for a father who rarely came. She is the child Doris worried about when she knew she was dying. She is the child that inheritance was meant to protect. Maybe that makes me selfish. Maybe it makes me realistic. Maybe in a blended family, those two things can look almost the same depending on which child you are standing closest to. Logan says we are moving forward, but sometimes I can still feel the bruise under the surface. His family is polite now, but not warm. Megan keeps her distance. Cheryl has stopped mentioning Doris. Honestly, I am fine with that. Peace does not always look like everyone understanding you. Sometimes it looks like sitting at your kitchen table, knowing people are still judging you, but your child's future is safe anyway. So that is where we are now. Still married. Still healing. Still careful. And Lily's trust is still untouched. Was I wrong for protecting my daughter's inheritance before marriage, even if it meant my stepchildren would never benefit from it the same way?